Welcome again to all 5 or 6 of our viewers, and most of all, welcome to Duncan Higgins, who is with me. We are
Hello,
with each
Graham.
other. We're together as ever. Sorry, I was a
Yeah.
bit distracted. We have a 76% download rate, so I hope we stay online.
I'm 99%.
Oh well, yours is as long as one as long as so am I now. Anyway, today we're going to be talking in a kind of rough couplet to last week. We're going to be
Hmm.
talking about music, and I think it's fair to say, of all the topics we've treated so far, this is the one that is most written into the DNA of Fella 33. Refused to sink. It could be a monster. We could talk about this for a long time, but we'll try and remain disciplined. And I thought I'd build on the what seems to be improvised tradition of starting off by one of us throwing a big question at the other person that can't really be satisfactorily answered. And I thought about this after the last one, when we were talking about all sorts of things to do with wavelengths and physicality. And the question is as follows, and I would be interested to hear your answer. When or under what criteria would you consider noise to become music? In other words, what do we at what point do we decide something stops being noise and becomes music? Why do we make that distinction?
Ooh, that's good, Graham. Off the cuff, straight away, I don't give a shit is my first answer. Whether it's one thing or another actually doesn't really matter. However, now I'm thinking out loud. When does, yeah, okay. And for some people, noise is noise, and for others, the noise is music. I definitely hear that. Some of the music I know you and me have listened to and still do and share, our good partners would say, "What's that noise you keep playing all the time?" So there must be something in there that we could pick away at to try and see. When I think of noise, I think from where we were last week, it's more relate to trying to then locate an object that creates a sound. So you hear something, a noise, be it tiny little whisper all the way to something really shattering. You're consciously thinking about what made the sound, and it's a mental thing you do immediately, imagining what is the sound. And obviously sometimes it's direct correspondence between looking at something that's made a sound and it comes back to you. I suppose if I think about music, it's a conscious difference between, I'm thinking as I'm thinking out loud here. There's some conscious decision to say this is music rather than noise. And it's not like, oh, I can beautiful sounds outside the window during the day today. That's not music. But if I said, okay, listen to the music of the city, then maybe conceptually we would shift the paradigm of, is that a noise or is it music? So maybe it's as much a conceptual
Yeah,
distinction where you say at this point, hang on, that's a piece of music, Graham, rather than me
mm.
tapping on a flask. It's probably at root, conceptually, something like that.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's what
I think
I mean, I'm thinking that out, and I'd have to think about that now. But okay,
let's
that's a
think
start.
about it. I mean, it's a good. I think it's a good start because I think there are two things in what you're saying which are actually, from my point of view, really important in relation to this silly starting question of the difference between noise and music. One is, I suppose you call it intention, or maybe consciousness, or maybe action. You know that even if
tensions.
yeah, I mean, even if you are listening to something like and this is going to get a bit niche, but we are quite niche, aren't we? But Elaine Radigi, right? Or William Basinski, or drone generally. There's I can imagine a lot of people going, "That's just noise." That sort of reactionary response, but it's not just noise because it has activity within it. It is produced. It has some conceptual driver. It is something produced by a conscious
Yeah.
human. So the activity within noise seems to give it music, and I think give it a musical meaning. And I think that's interesting because it then leads us to a question like, is birdsong music? And I would say birdsong isn't music. Actually, I don't know what we call it, but I'd like music to be this active human project, I suppose. And the other thing about it, which I think is really at the heart of everything to do with art generally, and perhaps everything ever, is the question of taste or value judgment, which maybe in music more than most other areas is taste and judgment is just constantly under laboring what one thinks of as good or bad music. Like, you know, the term pop music comes with all sorts of taste connotations. Classical music, which is a stupid phrase, is also, you know, kind of seen as things toffs appreciate or produce. And, you know, there's these kind of other, a whole series of different forms of music. I mean, music is very often raced, particularly through the subdiscipline of ethnomusicology. You know, I mean, it happens in literature and in art and everything else. I know taste is kind of how these things get produced in one way or another, but it does strike me that maybe music is particularly beset by these kinds of value judgment. You know, so you can't really
Yeah.
enjoy a piece of pop music without someone thinking you're simple-minded. Whereas if you listen to Bartok's string quartets, then it's kind of like, wow, okay, yeah, I'm actually really appreciating this music on a different level. And you know, and that's just taste, and also quite a lot of snobbery, I would say. So yeah, value
Agree.
judgments and activity, I think those are big parts of it.
I think the um, value judgment is intentionality, and intentionality is value judgment. I see them as absolutely. I've written them down as being totally interdependent on each other.
Mm,
I really agree with you. I mean, I think um, certainly at different periods in my life, a bit like which football team do you support, the type of music that you listen to was also a very much a kind of being in a gang, getting the latest whatever sounds from a certain band, or the obscurity of some bands became that one bit like a badge of honor. And I think it's an absolute cultural driver. We know that music aligns itself absolutely culturally to movements, doesn't it? And um, you can be identified culturally through your musical associations, can't you?
yeah,
All the way through to courts of law, there have been instances where, oh gosh, lots of examples of music's been used from all the way. What was it? The first one, if you played one of those Black Sabbath records backwards or something, inciting the devil or something, all the way
yeah,
through to rap music. You know, when Chuck D is really open about, you know, all Public Enemy, you know, the kickback that he got as a black artist writing and how that politically became very charged, didn't it, in a very white American conservative point of view. So again, it's a huge cultural driver, music, isn't it? Aligned to fashion, we're off. It kind of wraps itself into all these different contexts, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And
Whether
the
you're
thing about that,
yeah, sorry.
just to, I think, emphasize something you mentioned in passing, and something I wanted to talk about, maybe in a different context later, is the term drive. I don't think. I mean, I'm always immersing myself in things because that's all I've got to do nowadays. So it's good to go and read and listen and look at stuff, and try and get as much meaning out of everything as possible. I try and be as undiscriminatory as possible in all of those things, and I would flatter myself I have a pretty broad knowledge or taste in music, and it seems to me, having that familiarity and living with it every day, that music is more than anything else something that really powerfully motivates or fills one with motivation in a way that a really good book or a very good piece of art or a sunset even or whatever doesn't really do. The word drive, I think, is really key. And I think to kind of add a little detail to what you were saying about youth and youth subculture, which is a Western phenomenon from the 1950s. It is a historiography it's a musical historiography, and it doesn't make any sense. Youth subcultures don't make sense without music. And the reason for that is that music is what motivates people to basically to produce ethnic sentiment. I am this. It's not I'm a bit like this, or I'm this aligned or this contingent. It's I am this, and it's expressed in language, dress, modes of transport, the people I associate with, all these kind of different things. But all of it is actually about music and an affinity to a certain kind of music. So music is remarkable, arguably unique and remarkable in generating almost excessive affect, emotional responses in people when they encounter the music that they, for their own reasons, find wondrous. I don't think anything else quite matches that.
Good one. Yeah, the three things pop up straight away with that. I think from driver that I use to motivation, it is absolutely my main engine, really, day to day. And thinking about it probably always has been. I gave a talk recently. I was invited, which was very generous, to talk about my work. And in thinking about it, I really got into this weird resistance with myself, because I know how there is a certain narrative it starts here, then it moves to here, and I can show images that kind of narrate that. And I just thought I wanted to be really honest. So I ended up talking about all the music I listened to and not about the art. I showed the art but didn't talk. And I think some people were really pissed off.
Yeah.
There were people who actually said that gave us a real insight to something which we normally don't get from artist talk, question, inverted commas. Because if I think about, I'm sat in the studio today, all I've had on loop is the new Lightning Bolt record and they've done it with the Japanese, I think there's 4 women, isn't there? 000I 000.
Oh, Uyu.
You got it.
Yeah. Fantastic. They've done a collaboration.
Oh, it's extraordinary, Graham.
Right.
And he put it on loop, and that absolutely lifted me into a I don't know what to call it, some kind of emotional position. where you stop thinking. So you undo the cognitive thinking language, and it opens then up this different. Um, it is a language because it's emotions, but it's not in words. Now that's the bit that motivation for me
Yeah.
is the drive is when it's pre and post cog, isn't it? It's not a thing you can articulate directly through using words or language. Although I did sit down today and write something because I thought you were going to ask me, tell me what do you think about music. So I did. I thought it was a really nice challenge. I'll get to it. Perhaps tomorrow. But you touch on it. It's visceral. Music goes in, doesn't it? I mean it's
Yeah.
obvious. How it goes in and where it goes in affects that. And again, last week you were talking about, earphones. The experience of listening to music on earphones is really different to a live performance, or I don't know, music in the room, volume and everything. But it's such a massive part of my life.
Come back. Oh, you are back.
Yes, good.
Music in the room
I,
was the last thing I heard.
or music in the room. It's such a massive part of my life. Massive.
Yeah.
And you said, like you, I'd read a lot, I watch stuff, films, etc. But actually, music's the constant, consistent day-to-day thing that I do. And I'm kind
Mm.
of really, I was going to ask you about this. I'm really greedy. So one thing that, listening habits have changed because of technology, but for me it's fantastic. I've got no gripes about whether it's a download or an album, or I don't mind. They're all different things. Listening is the one musical thing I think I have. I think I mentioned that last week. And it's, I mean, I could probably say a bit more about what came up in the artist talk because I had really specific examples I can name that really changed the way I think about the work I was making and stuff. Um, and I know we're always looking for very literal translations. And in art history, there are obvious crossovers between music and art, whether it's been made for art or with art, or it's inspired, that's a horrible word, but has been inspired by art, and music vice versa. It's not that I'm interested in. It's this question around a kind of a physical state that music just kind of opens its arms for you. It's wonderful.
Yeah. I think one of the things about music is because, you've got those kind of horrid categorical correspondences. I think probably in European history, Baroque is, well, it's the one that springs to mind, the Baroque music and the Baroque architecture and the Baroque styling in painting. And those are kind of crude and stupid and kind of produce these boundaries around things. But I think one of the things that music does really well, because it just floats around and can be used by anyone, it is the ultimate signifier, really. It's so tangential, right? So you can usually find that most people, most ordinary people, the masses, if you like, will have some classical music knowledge from some kind of contingent exposure to it that they'll be able to remember and on some level appreciate, even if it's something they've heard through a jingle, or because classical music sneaks into all sorts of jingles and gets used in film and television, and they'll know it and they'll go, oh yeah, blah blah blah. I mean, I'm kind of speculating there, but it does illustrate that there's a kind of tangential aspect to music. If it's broadcast, you never know where it's going to land, or how people are going to find it, and that's you can't. And in the absence of people throwing books at each other, you just don't get that with any other form of cultural production. So I whether we all like it or not, there'll be bits of music that we don't think are us that we know and kind of like because they're just part of the ether. And I think that's a really good thing, right? Because otherwise you get these kind of, I mean, to use a familiar stereotype, John Peel listeners who will go on about how they they love grindcore but they don't like Footwork or something, like these kind of niche-y, the Wire magazine kind of, this is the thing we that's the kind of thing we like, and we're not interested in these other things. But you can't, fuck you. You can't opt out. Music will catch you. Something you weren't expecting, you will enjoy. If it's Madonna, or if it's Vivaldi, or whatever, or Shania Twain. I can't think of any of her music, but I will have heard it. And if someone goes, "Oh, this is Shania Twain," I'll go, "Oh yeah, da 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 da." And on some level, I'll think it's all right, So music is really good.
That's the tricky bit, isn't it? Because it's back to this value and judgment thing. And I think even in our family, there's, I thought you didn't like them. Or something sneaks up on you in a way that I didn't know it was Taylor Swift, but it was really moving in context to how I heard it.
Yeah, of course.
And then, he was Swifty now. And you're going, no, I just like this piece of music. So when I was thinking about music, I think one of the things that keeps in our week-to-week conversations, which I really like, is it's like the little picture and the big picture for me. So if you say, okay, I'm trying to think, okay, Lightning Bolt. I don't like all of Lightning Bolt's music, but some of it absolutely rings every single bell for me. And it's this trying to think about, we have these sort of more generic things like, oh, you really like Lightning Bolt, therefore you must like such and such. That's what Boom Cat does, doesn't it? They say, if you like this, you like that drone metal noise. And for me, it's like, I buy records, and that thing where you're meant to like all of it because you've invested $6.99 on a download or whatever. Sometimes there's only 3 tracks I really like, and so you're left in this weird thing where it's not all of it all the time. So I have this kind of this way of organizing sometimes music in like playlists where you can have certain groupings of music, and I really like putting that on shuffle, so then you've got maybe 10 songs that are all bangers for you, and you just shuffle it and put it on loop and it plays all day. So it was like, again, the Taylor Swift thing. Just because I like one Taylor Swift song, it's like, oh, what, you want you to Taylor Swift now? No. So it's like moving past these. You mentioned it before, these kind of like terribly crude, defining cultural generic things. Oh, if you don't like Footwork, then you can't like Jungle. Or, oh, I thought you were into screamcore, and but you're listening to some of the Bach cello pieces. How does and it's just trying to get past all that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I mean, I just think the more you shouldn't. It's intrinsically Philistine to refuse to listen to a piece of music because you think it's not the music you should be listening to, even if the music is rubbish and you don't listen to it for very long. You still have an obligation, maybe to. You have a duty to the spirit of music, to listen to it, and it's always going to be in some fashion, I think, enriching. Sometimes when me and Jane are in the car, we listen to radio too, and they have all of these kind of programs that it seems to me the entire scheduling of Radio 2 is dedicated to people in the age group 50 to 80 who are driving off on their holidays. So it's always kind of the DJ going, "Oh, we have a caller on the line here, or an email from someone, and they're just off to Devon, and they ask if you could play some of that wonderful T-Rex that was in the pop charts in 1970 something." So we have all of these playlists in the 1970s, and they're songs, by Sweet or T-Rex, or I can't even remember the names of the bands now, but they're all amazing. They're all brilliant. You wouldn't listen to them in any other context. Like you're in the car and you listen to them once, and once is enough. But when they're on, you don't go, "Oh God, I don't like that," because I'm currently, listening to ECM's new modern jazz release by Tord Gustafsson. You think that's fucking great, that song. It's got some violins in it, and it's also a disco music song, and it's fucking good. And I might even sing along a bit to it. And then, and that's job done, isn't it? Imagine being a wanker who says,
I'm not going to agree particularly with that, Graham.
Well, and you're wrong, aren't you?
Because it really fucking winds me up. Six music in the car is a no-no, because the kind of rhetoric of regurgitated crass nostalgia is horrible.
But I agree with that. That's why I say Radio 2.
Oh, hello.
If I turn on Radio 6 and get another sad reflection on the death of Kurt Cobain, I'll spit on my radio. It is the most melancholic, nostalgic derivative.
So is this like?
But Radio 2 is like all happy.
Okay, I'll have to give it a go, Graham. And it's all the former hip Radio 1 DJs have moved into, isn't it? Is you go into the afternoon Radio 2 slot. That's been disingenuous, because obviously there's a very loyal listening, including yourself and Jane, who will tune into Radio 2 in an afternoon. Journeying along the coast to Worthing or wherever it is you're going.
Worthing.
But it's this, in that there is this idea again, isn't there, of you mentioned before that kind of culturally, it's from the 50s, these kind of movements of youth culture, very aligned to music and fashion and art. And now we're in this kind of weird, endless loop, aren't we? Where each generation goes back to, where are we up to now? 90s at the moment, isn't it? Right? And it's this thing where you're listening to something that I remember listening to when I was, 16, 17, and suddenly it's like, this is the new banger from such and such who are heavily influenced by, and it's kind of odd, because maybe in my generation there was a sense of like you buy and listen to music as an absolute act, not against your parents, but against their generation. And it was, for me, and I know our small gang at the time, it was like you didn't want to listen to your bloody parents' music. Whereas it's weird now, like everything, it's shifted, hasn't it? It's moved on.
Yeah.
But something about, I think right at the beginning, what I was talking about, maybe I should tell you what I thought music was for me, Graham.
Go on, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so it's not a whole thing. These are all kind of parts of something. It's part lament. And in musicology, the word lament I'm very interested in. Part lament. It's a part rallying cry, because I really do listen to music as a kind of stimulus. It's part ritual, because I think I am very and it's part repetition. So the idea of repeating things ad infinitum sometimes on loop. So I'm also within that the idea of it's called drone, but that opens up a whole bunch of subgenres within it. But there's something about elongated sound which ties into ritual repetition, rallying cry. I'm really into sort of crystallized, fractured guitars, that kind of sound that comes out of magnets and electrical currents. There's something partly cinematic I'm interested in, and that's what I really like. But it's in real time because you're listening to it in real time. So it's like it's cinematic in the real time. And for me, music is the most triumphant spectral protest. There you go. That's a good ending. I still think there's something in me that is about, it's not as crude as fuck you, but there's some gesture in music that is really important to me. And it's a kind of triumphant thing. It's a kind of celebratory thing. But there is this spectral thing around it, which you can't pin down. And I did think protest is perhaps not the right word, but it's something around that. So there you go.
Yeah, maybe resistance.
Yeah, that's better. Refuse to sink.
Basically, yeah.
Resistance
No, it
is
makes a
better.
lot. That does make a lot of sense, and you've also kind of described Fela, I think, to quite a high degree. I'm interested in, yeah. So that's really good stuff, I think. But I'm interested in lament as the first one you mentioned as a coordinate, because it's one component, it's one emotional component, isn't it? The lament, and I'm wondering why you picked it out.
Okay, it starts in well, it's the blues, isn't it? Whether it's played on bagpipes or whether it's played on a steel string guitar or whether it's played through electronic, there's something about a passing and a kind of mourning for something, and that can be a celebratory thing as much as a sort of doom core. But I think lament music has, for me, had a really strong association with that idea of time and recall of something you can't recall.
Yeah,
But you kind of can, but I don't know what you call it. There's some, I mean, in literature, ennui is a sort of French term, isn't it? In Russia, there's a number of words in Russian which are this you can't describe it. It's like this thing that's always getting away from you, but you still want it.
yeah.
You know,
I mean,
sorry, go on.
yeah. No, I mean, I asked the question because I kind of wondered about it myself, thinking about my own musical habits and engagements, and I came to sort of think about what is it in the lament, broadly speaking, that I like, and there are two things. One is folk music. It seems to me that, and I mean folk music in the same way as you, music produced in a community, not necessarily someone with a kind of brown jumper on in a Devon pub, although those are perfectly fine. But there's loads of different kinds of folk music, and very often they do settle onto loss or lament or reminiscence.
Longing. Yeah.
And I think that's one part of it. And the other one is religious music, and that's an interesting one because in the European canon, almost all music is kind of, in the big picture, almost all music is kind of driven by some sort of religious motivation, for want of a better word. And particularly, as I mentioned Arvo Pärt last week, one of his pieces of work is called Adam's Lament, which is the principle biblical emotional relay, right? The fall.
Hit it.
So it is, lamenting is really powerful and has generated a great deal of value. But I did want to make one distinction, which is between the notion of a lament and the more thorny and less likable word melancholia. Although William Basinski has a very good CD called Melancholia, I would suggest that
our listeners go away and read it, listen to it.
yeah, it'll really cheer you up. But it is a far more problematic, but still awkwardly associated term, right? Melancholia. It was initially seen as a disease.
Yeah, originally, yeah.
And has been associated with things like homesickness, which is really powerful in folk music. I mean, blues music was very often a lament caused by the still horrendously unbelievable violence of the Atlantic slave trade and the plantation system that came with it. So yeah, there's a kind of, I think it's tricky. The fuzzy boundary between something like a lament and something like melancholia is a tricky one.
I think spiritual. You use the word spiritual, and again, that absolutely crosses over into a whole area of things we've been talking about, and in both religious and secular ways. The spiritual value of music in all manner of different contexts is massive. It moves you. So I mean,
yeah,
there aren't many things, that I would go to listen, to be moved in a way. And sometimes you can narrate that yourself because certain pieces of music you want to listen to, or other times it sneaks up on you and suddenly you find yourself, oh my God, that's fucking amazing. And it may be something you've listened to 100 times, and yet it still has the ability to sneak up on you. I mean, that's pretty extraordinary, in a way. I can't think of many other things that, in literature and friendship.
It doesn't do it, does it?
Say again.
I don't think literature does that. I think literature can be beautiful and wonderful and make you see the world differently, but it won't make you feel the kinds of things that you were just talking about. That you can call spiritual. I'm quite happy to use that word in a realized way. You don't get that. The only thing I can think of where I get that is football. It's the only other time when I feel spiritual. When it's difficult to put into words, but music, I get that. Even listening on listening to a download, but certainly listening live or whatever. Music makes you dance. Right. I never want to start moving around when I'm reading. What's a really good book I've read recently? I read, funnily enough, because of our podcast, I read The Sea by Iris Murdoch. And that's an amazing book.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised by it. But I never thought, really? I was never doing that. And I've never done it. I've never seen a piece of art and thought, this is a really good portrait of somebody. So I think music is you have to sort of think music does something that other cultural outputs don't do, apart from football.
Absolutely. And we know the collective gathering of people at concerts or at raves or at going to a dance event, just getting totally swept off your feet by the emotion of it, and a collective thing. I was thinking about the Greasy Chip Butty song. Even though it kind of gets a bit formulaic and predictable, there's still something about it to... Because I was sat in the garden at the weekend and it was really still, quiet, and suddenly I heard it coming from Bramall Lane, just wafted over. And you kind of got goosebumps. And you think, there's 20,000 people singing that all together. not listening to the words, but the collective act, wasn't it? Of the I think that's a because the weird thing, the way that songs and music, every football Premier League team has to have a song now at the beginning, and you just think this is really naff, and these totally inappropriate songs that are played at Forest now, and you think, why? Well, this is some
I don't know the
thing.
Forest one.
They did like Fog on the Tyne or something that they've
What?
reappropriated into Fog on the Trent or something.
No. Oh, no, that's
And
well, I mean, yeah, it's difficult.
Sweet Caroline was the one I was thinking about. How, bless him, he's done well out of it, hasn't he?
Yeah. Who did that? I don't even
I
know
can't,
who made that
one
song.
of our listeners will tell
But
us.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, on the, just to skew that a little bit, to move it into something more to do with the kind of political aspects of music. And political is usually a code for buzzkill, but um, the collectivity of participating in music and how we understand that drive moves us towards the anthem. And when we think about the anthem, then immediately, or at least I do, I think of the national anthem. And when I think of the national anthem, I think of war. And it isn't, I think, a coincidence that the military history, the big millennial military history, tends to suggest that a lot of wars are fought with musicians in their cohorts, right? People will sing war cries or anthems, and even the New Zealand rugby players will do their thing at the beginning of the haka, at the beginning of their rugby, which no one seems to be bothered about anymore. They all just go, yeah, whatever. But the anthem and war, the military band, the war cry. There is something in music that potentially, I would suggest, is kind of dangerous. It's the flip side of the football anthem is maybe the war anthem. The danger of having such a powerful emotional resource to hand, whoever is wielding it, is that it can be, because the human experience is not, I think most of the time, almost everyone is predisposed to be a good person. But it is always potentially a dangerous thing, music.
Yeah, I mean, it was Thatcher, wasn't it, who introduced the bill of a gathering of, is it more than 3 people around a sound, you could be arrested?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
the
it was,
illegal, I can't remember. It had all
yeah,
those laws, they have a stupidly sanitized name, Illegal
yeah,
Gathering Act,
yeah.
to
So
stop all the rave.
the last bit, I just wanted to, because running through all the pods that we've cast so far, we've had this reference to I know we both have real interest in language and languages in the, like sound, like color, like writing, etc. That it felt appropriate that we address this idea of writing, given that you're absolutely preoccupied with this. Myself, I have a very different relationship to you. I know I do, but I write an awful lot. So maybe as an exit from the wondrous world of music, we line up something to do with writing and language.
Bingo. Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, what are you going to go off and listen to now?
Oh, that's a good question, and I do know the answer. This is William Basinski's On Time Out of Time. And the reason I want to listen to it is because and I'll quote here, these works utilize, among other things, exclusive source recordings from the interferometer of LIGO, capturing the sounds of the merging of 2 distant massive black holes 1.3 billion years ago. So that's William Basinski using sounds made by a celestial phenomenon 1.5 billion years ago. That's what I'm listening to.
Wow, good for you. Wonderful. All
Yeah.
right.
What are you going to go and listen to then? More Taylor, eh? Getting the tape.
No,
to go.
football. It's
Football.
football. It's the semi-final, Villa versus Forest.
Ah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll see if I can watch that. I don't know if I can, but yeah.
I think I don't know. I'll find it. Anyway, always good to see you, Graham.
Yes. Great
And
stuff. And yeah, we'll be back next week.
don't forget to subscribe and like.
Cheerio now.
See ya.